Hey there, listeners. This is Terry Cowley, your host of the R.M.Williams OUTBACK podcast. Thanks so much for being here and welcome to Season 3. Baby John Wright jumped the starter's gun when he was born, suddenly arriving in the back of a car, rushing his mum to hospital. His dramatic delivery was perhaps a premonition of things to come in a fast-paced adult life of farming, shearing, tank building, studying, truck driving, and a host of other jobs before giving them all up to be a bush nurse. John Wright joins me now to talk about his amazing life. Hello, John.
Hello, Terry. Good to be with you today.
Perhaps we can start with your current role and then we might wind back the years. So you have a role as Nurse Education and Research Coordinator at Tennant Creek Hospital in the Northern Territory's remote Barkly district. You're also a part-time Flinders University teaching academic, and when not demonstrating emergency life-saving techniques or presenting other staff training needs, you volunteer and lead the local SES unit. Now, that's all right now, and that is a lot. Can you talk us through your current occupation?
Yes, so as you said, currently I'm employed as a nurse educator, but also coordinating research. Being in a small country town, it's much broader than that, of course. I wear many, many hats at work. The title is just a title. I'm responsible for pretty much all of the education that happens in the hospital, with the exception of the medical staff who have their specialist training. So not just nurses.
Then you've got your academic role as well as your role with the SES.
One day a week, I have the great privilege to work with Flinders University as a teaching academic. That gives me an opportunity to use my educator skills in the academic space as a university educator, coordinating particularly health student placements right through the Barkly region. I've managed in my role to significantly increase the support for students from a clinical perspective. The university's always been very good at pastoral support, and I have excellent colleagues that do that, but my role is providing the clinical support for students that want to come and experience a remote area. I feel very passionate about that because research shows strongly that students who have a positive exposure to remote living and remote work during their training are much more likely to try it as a career option later in life, compared to those that do everything in the city and don't get to experience it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, doesn't it, when you say it like that?
It does.
So it's really important to give young health staff that experience early on.
The other thread that we mentioned was my work with the NTES, or which is the Northern Territory version of the State Emergency Service, or SES, that most people will know. I joined that organisation, I think, about 11 years ago. My daughter and I joined together, something that we could do with each other outside of work, something different. I said at the time, I always seem to end up in leadership roles. And I said at the time, I don't want to be the boss. I don't want to have any responsibility. I just want to be a team member. That lasted for probably 8 months. And then I was appointed as the unit officer, which would be equivalent to the local controller in other jurisdictions, which makes me responsible for the management of the unit at a local level, recruiting and training volunteers and making sure everyone is ready to respond to emergencies. I've now been the unit officer for just over 10 years.
Wow. Is it kind of a case that in a smaller community, people really do have to step up, don't they?
It's very true. I have been a serial volunteer my whole adult life. I started as an ambulance service volunteer in country South Australia. And then when I moved to the Northern Territory, I did a short stint with the bushfire organisation. And then at my daughter's urging, I went to the SES and have been there ever since. I like volunteering. I think it's essential for the operation of small country towns. We need to work together. The only way that we're going to get things done in remote areas and country areas is to work together. And I think that's part of the ethos of the Australian country life, is that people pull together and support each other. And I'm very proud to be a part of that myself and to be a recipient of that when I need help. And I'm looking for someone to help me with something, there's always someone around who'll help. You just have to ask.
You were also a long-standing voluntary board member and teacher with Australia's peak representative body for remote health, Krana Plus. So obviously you have touched on it, but you obviously feel really passionately about rural, regional and remote health.
I am very passionate about remote and isolated health practice is the section that I identify with, but obviously includes regional because often the regional and outer regional practitioners lack a voice. So Krana Plus is committed to being a voice for people who are otherwise not heard. I've had the great privilege of spending 19 years on the board of directors. I retired from that in November, so I can't claim that title anymore, but it will always remain a treasured experience in my memory of being able to contribute on a wider stage than just my little country town area. I'm still involved as a fellow of the organisation and still very much involved with voluntary teaching. We'll travel all over the Northern Territory and teach into the face-to-face courses, which rely on volunteers to make them affordable and accessible to remote areas. So I'm very proud to remain a part of that. The funny thing about that is that many times you hear people say that you're in the right job if you would do it for nothing, which means I'm in the right job because I do it for nothing at times.
Right. John, what is a typical day for you, if there is such a thing?
Typical days are hard to define. My wife is totally and permanently disabled, so the day starts with providing care for her and making sure that she's comfortable and set up for the day, and then heading off to either the hospital or the university, but it's mostly the hospital, obviously. When I get into work, it's doing the rounds, making sure that I know what's happening in the facility, that make sure everybody knows who I am and I know all the new people that have showed up. Then it's the emails. The rest of the morning is spent with meetings with managers, working out what training needs are required and writing materials for the afternoon teaching session. The early afternoon is spent teaching, so hands-on teaching to staff in the various clinical units.
Now, what you're saying may sound a step or two removed, but what this is all about is basically just giving better healthcare, isn't it?
Absolutely. Fundamentally, my job is about improving patient care.
Bush nurse, that sounds really practical. Do you still identify with that term?
I certainly do still consider myself to be a remote area nurse because we are remote.
So you often drive long distances to deliver this sort of training to make sure that staff in other places are, well equipped to deal with what comes their way.
Long distance travel is always a part of living in remote areas. And to provide the education services across the Barkly region, it requires travel. Either the educator has to travel out to the clinics, of which there are 5 full-time and 1 part-time clinic in our region, and either I have to go out to them or they have to come into me. So either way, it's a lot of travel, it's a lot of logistics. And there are times where I've had the great privilege of being able to go out to remote clinics.
John, why is it so important to present that or to offer that bush-based training? It's obviously different to what you get elsewhere.
You're right, it is different. I think the differentness comes in the breadth of the training, because my experience of working in metropolitan and inner regional areas is that people tend to become quite specialised. So they will work in a particular area, a particular specialty or a particular location, but that's a luxury you can't afford when you're out bush. If you're sometimes the only health practitioner on site, but fortunately that is becoming more uncommon. But even so, you may be a team of only 2 or 3 health practitioners, and you have to be able to do everything, literally. And even if you can't technically do something, you have to be prepared to get on the phone or on the camera and get somebody to help you, but you're the one that's actually going to have to do it. So the training has to be broad-based. It has to be focused on the remote context. You can't just shoehorn, say, an advanced life support course from a big city hospital where you have a team of, 8 people and expect them to do the same thing in a remote clinic where they've got 3 staff.
Can you give me an example of when you've really had to bring in that sort of really broad-based training you've had, like some sort of situation you were put in that you had to deal with you couldn't ever imagine having to deal with if you were, say, in a city hospital?
Where do I start? I'll give you two little examples. I think this will answer your question. On a broader example, I was a highly skilled trauma specialised emergency nurse when I first went bush. So I went to staff a remote health clinic in remote South Australia, and I was super confident, highly skilled. It doesn't matter what happens, I'll be fine. I'll be able to deal with it. I was quite shocked to discover that was probably less than 10% of my work was dealing with traumas and medical emergencies. The other 90% was primary healthcare, keeping people healthy, giving immunisations, doing baby checks and adult health checks, about which I knew absolutely nothing. So that really stretched me, and that's how I acquired a Master of Remote Health Practice, nurse practitioner, and that was purely because I felt I don't know what I'm doing, so I need more education, and partly that's driven my desire to be an educator as well. So that's a broader answer to your question. A more specific answer was in another remote clinic. We had someone that had some terrible injuries, and I was the most senior health practitioner on site. We did have a GP, a general practitioner, but he was away that day. The patient needed a tube put in their chest to release a lot of air that was where it shouldn't have been, and that is a procedure which is done by medical staff. But I had seen it dozens of times as a trauma nurse and participated in many of them, but I'd never actually done it. So we got the surgeon on the phone, and he talked me through how to put in this drain.
Was that frightening?
I didn't have time to be frightened, and I knew the principles by heart. I was just nervous about actually doing it. Like, where do you actually put where do you make the cut with the scalpel? How far do you put your finger? All that stuff. But I was too busy to be scared. I got the shakes afterwards, and then definitely had a debrief and a chat with the psychological counsellor after that. But
how did it go, John?
it went okay. Yes, the person ultimately did not survive the injuries, but we kept him alive far, far longer than anybody thought was possible, and we got him out of our community into the regional hospital before he sadly passed away. The other amazing part of that is my educator hat on. I had 2 nursing students with me that day, and they managed the patient's airway. So they also needed a bit of counselling after that, but they told me later that that was one of the most fantastic experiences they'd ever been a part of. Apart from the sad outcome, which unfortunately is more common in remote areas. You can only do what you can do.
And you want to have known that you have done what you can do, I guess, too. That's important.
Yeah, and that's why debriefing was so important.
Tell me, what's it really like at Tennant Creek Hospital?
It's hard to quantify. To give you an idea, I came for 6 months, and that was 15 years ago. So there's something about it that really gets into you. I think a lot of it, when we do staff surveys every year, a common refrain that comes back, it's the people. It's the team of people that we have to work with. They're just brilliant. And I've been through some personal trauma in recent times, and the people around me, they've just been absolutely fantastic, just supporting, encouraging, just being there for me as I struggled through the issues. And yeah, I don't know if I would have got that somewhere else. I may have, but I was surprised and very much heartened to receive it from my current workplace.
Is that something private that you don't wish to discuss, John?
Yeah, I guess I can share it in general details that some unexplored trauma from my childhood, which was just absolutely awful childhood, and I thought that I'd put it behind me. I hadn't. I'd only hidden it. I hadn't actually dealt with it, and it came up and threatened to destroy my marriage. My wife very bravely pushed me to seek some mental health assistance.
And your colleagues really had your back through that period.
Absolutely.
And no doubt you would return the favour.
Oh, absolutely. I've already become more emotionally aware of the people around me. So I've found since my experience, I've actually noticed 2 other staff members struggling. I've sat and talked to them, and they've said that that's been really, really appreciated. Yeah, my workmates have been a fantastic role model for how you make a small, isolated workplace inclusive and help people to deal with, because I had my particular traumas, but I would say that probably everyone that works in a remote facility has some sort of trauma to deal with, even if it's just the trauma of being remote and isolated from their family and their friends and their usual way of life.
You want to be okay in yourself so that you can help the patients in the best way you can. Obviously, that's what it's all about in the end.
Absolutely, yeah. You can't. It's been said about nursing that you can't pour from an empty cup, and it is so true.
Yeah, because you really have to give of yourself, don't you?
You have to be authentic with people. If you're just putting on a brave face, it's pretty obvious. Everyone can see that your heart's not really in it, and that doesn't help develop those good, strong relationships with people. And that's a really important thread where I work, because the vast majority of our patients are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people, and relationship is everything. If you don't have a relationship, then you are literally just a band-aid clinic.
Yeah, because they're very vulnerable.
They're very vulnerable, yeah. And if they don't feel like they can trust you, then I think your ability to help in any meaningful way is really limited.
You mentioned Indigenous patients. You've also been very encouraging of Indigenous nurses.
Yes, I've had the great privilege of encouraging Aboriginal people that I have worked with, particularly in remote clinics, but also in my current role, who have started out in various roles, such as a patient assistant or an admin officer. So one of my colleagues, who I'm extremely proud of, was an admin officer, and then they went on to do their Aboriginal health practitioner training. That is a step into a registered health practitioner. And then they transitioned across to do enrolled nursing and became an enrolled nurse, which is another registered practitioner. And now they're a fully qualified registered nurse with a Bachelor of Nursing. At the start of that process, there were a lot of people that said, no, it's too hard. You're not going to be able to do it. No, you don't have the literacy skills, whatever. And it's like, don't say that. No, if you put your heart and your soul into it, you're going to make it. And she's made it. And I'm really, really proud of her. So we've just started that process with a new person who is just starting exactly that same process with us this year.
I would imagine one of the outcomes of that is more Indigenous people seeking healthcare.
That's right, because this particular person, I hope, will be a role model for other people at the local high school that, hey, if they can do that, so can I.
So nursing runs in your family, John. Your wife Anita was a nurse, and your eldest daughter Laura is nursing with you. That must be pretty special.
Yes, it is. Some shifts, I've had some amazing shifts, because I still do some clinical shifts on the floor in the emergency department, just to stay relevant as an educator, and because I love patient care. There have been several shifts where, because there are two nurses on a shift in our emergency department, and there's been a couple of times where Laura and I were the two nurses on shift. That was the father-daughter team, and it was really special to see her professionalism and just the way that she's taken everything that she's learnt from me, and she's just taken it to a whole nother level. I'm very proud of her.
Fantastic. So I did say we'd wind the years back. So you grew up on a small mixed farm on South Australia's Eyre Peninsula, one of my favourite places.
Yes.
What are your strong memories of that time?
Well, probably the strongest memories are something I probably don't need to share, but the strongest positive memories were just the freedom of being on the land. I guess it was a two-edged sword. I was homeschooled through the South Australian Correspondence School, and that was fantastic for me, because I was always a gifted student. That in the early 70s there was no programs whatsoever for gifted students, so I was mind-numbingly bored at school in class. So we left when I was in year 3 and moved out bush, and then I started doing correspondence schooling. So we would get a fortnightly mailed package with we didn't have radio or anything, so it was all done by mail. They would mail me out the package of lessons every fortnight, and I would do the whole package in one day and then have the rest of the fortnight off. And it was absolutely brilliant. Got a little bit tougher in year 11 and years 10 and 11. Took 2 days to finish the package.
So you did school at home all the way through?
All the way through, finished at year 11 because they didn't offer year 12 at that stage. And I just wanted to work on the land anyway. So I went and got work on various farms as, a tractor driver, fencing, picking rocks. That was fun. And truck driving, handling, operating grain silos. tank building at one stage, building water tanks. Then I got into shearing. Yeah, I thought that my life would be on the land. I never thought that I would leave the land.
Was that drought that changed that, or?
Yeah, drought and high interest rates. I saved up enough money. I started working full time on the land when I was 17. And by the time I was 19, I'd had enough money saved up to partner with a local farmer who didn't have a worker. And I didn't want to just work for wages. I wanted to work for a share of the crop. So it's share farming. So I pulled my resources with his and we put in a crop, which promptly failed. No rain. Who knew? We were growing wheat, barley, and triticale, and oats. So there were 4 cereals we were growing, and a few sheep. So then the second year, I did a bit more work, bit more shearing, bit more silo work, got some added to my savings, got enough money together to put in another crop and thought, right, this will get me going. That one failed too. So, right, well, I'm completely broke now. It's going to take me another 2 years to save up enough to try again. Or do I get a loan? And I had a look. Yeah, interest rates was sort of like 19 to 21%. And there was no guarantee that the third crop wouldn't fail as well. So I made the hard decision to go back to school and do year 12 and go to uni.
You studied surveying.
That was one of the many things I studied. Looking back on it, I'm absolutely amazed that nobody suggested an agriculture degree because I had no idea there was such a thing. Otherwise, I definitely would have done that. But I love the outdoors. I love being outdoors. And mathematics was by far and away my favourite subject. So they thought, well, surveying sounds like a perfect marriage there. So I enrolled in the School of Surveying and got halfway through a 4-year degree. But the problem is I'm blind in one eye. So there were 3 subjects that I was guaranteed fail. And then my then girlfriend, her mum was a GP. We'd spent a lot of time talking about healthcare because all through this I was a volunteer ambo. And she said, why don't you do medicine? So I applied and they said, look, we'd really like to, but you're a bad risk because you've started 3 degrees and haven't finished any of them. So they advised me to do nursing and said that when you finish nursing, come back and we'll give you a place in medical school. And they did. But there was a fly in the ointment, which I'm very, very pleased about, and that was that I met my beautiful wife, Anita, when I was a nursing student. We were both nursing students together. And yeah, so we got married and had to decide, well, do I accept this offer to do medicine? And we were newly married and wanted to have a family at some point. And we thought, well, it's going to be 10 years before you'll actually see me because I'm going to be so busy. And you're going to have to work to support me because I can't work and study medicine at the same time. So I decided I can't do that to you. So we decided to start a family instead. And I'd stick with nursing. And yeah, that was 31 years ago. We made that choice, and I have absolutely no regrets about that. Nursing has been an absolutely brilliant career, and it's been fantastic for working back out bush, which is where I came from.
You spent 7 years as a city hospital clinician before you decided to go bush. Tell me about that decision.
That was my lovely wife again. She could see that I was getting burnt out. I couldn't see it because I loved my job. I thought it was the best job in the world because, it was every day was different. There's always something. You didn't know what was going to come in the door, but whatever it was, you had to deal with it. And I loved it, but it was tearing me apart. And she saw it. And one day I came home and she said, I'm not sure it's the exact words, but as best I can remember it, she said something like, if you don't quit your job, I'm quitting you. And thought, well, that's an easy decision. So I wrote my resignation letter that very night. I was on night shift. He left it on my manager's desk and then went doing locum work all over country South Australia. Yeah, another interesting story. I spent nearly a year, I think, doing that, and Anita stayed at home with the babies and essentially a single mum. And I was coming home and good money, but I was away from my family for way, way too much of the time. And one day I was driving home and a song, it was Tanya Kernigan singing A Bushman Can't Survive. And I just burst into tears and thought, that's me. She's singing about me. I can't live in the city anymore. I just can't do this. So I got home and I said, honey, we need to leave. We need to go bush. And she said, okay. And I said, well, where do you want to go? And I'll never forget her response. Her response was, "I don't care. I just want us to be together. I'm sick of being a single mum." So we moved to Oodnadatta,
Wow.
which is a little dot in the desert in the middle of nowhere.
Was that because the job was there?
Yeah, the job was there. I realised through my agency work that the further away I was from the city, the happier I was. So I thought, well, that's pretty much as far as I can get and still be in the same state that I was registered in. So yeah, we went out bush, and much to my huge relief, my wife loved it. She really took to that lifestyle. Yeah, and of course the kids, they thought it was heaven. And yeah, basically we've lived remote ever since, except for a short stint in Alice Springs to add to our family.
Well, that's pretty remote.
But Alice Springs is still pretty remote. Yeah.
And then Tennant Creek 15 years ago.
Tennant Creek 15 years ago. Yeah, it was only meant to be a short stop on the journey, but it's become it is. It's the longest we've ever lived in one place since we got married. We thought when we moved in, we should plant a mango tree, and now we wish we had of. If we'd planted a mango tree, it would be 15 years old now. It'd be magnificent, but you just don't know.
In 2010, you did the Australian Rural Leadership Program.
Yes.
You describe it as life changing. Tell me a little bit about that. I'm really interested in the imposter syndrome that you mentioned that you felt, because I think a lot, or most of us feel that at some point or another. And the fact that you thought that the course challenged everything you knew about leadership.
I was very surprised to be selected for the program. I was pushed into putting in an application by a mentor in the remote health industry who thought that I would be a good fit. She wouldn't leave me alone. So to quieten her down, I put in an application and then got an interview. And it was an amazing experience. You go into an interview and, you do a bit of research and you try and get yourself prepared. I'm not sure there's anything that can prepare you for an ARLP interview.
Presumably they're trying to be unpredictable.
They are. And I realise now, looking back, the whole idea is to just get you to think on your feet and just see what sort of a person you are and how you deal with challenges. And then the whole program was about dealing with challenges and learning the value of teamwork, learning the value of connection and negotiation and being part of something bigger than yourself. And that leadership is not something that you're born with. Some people are born with those tendencies, but leadership is not something you're born with. It's something that can be learnt. And I've come to believe that it is something that not only can be taught, but which must be taught. Because if we don't teach leadership to everybody, even people who aren't ever going to be leaders themselves, at least if we teach leadership to everybody, the people that have the character traits that are required to become good leaders become good leaders. And the people who that's not for them, they become good followers because they know what leadership is about. So they'll respect the people who are in those positions leadership's not about a position. It's about respect and trust. It's about empathy. It's about bringing people along on a journey. And I didn't know any of that when I started this. It's been a pretty amazing experience. And looking back on it, I think that was the beginning of me realizing that I'm not as bad as I thought I was. And part of that,
to say the least.
yeah, and part of that is the imposter syndrome. Probably for the first 2 weeks, I felt like somebody's made a huge mistake here. I'm not supposed to be here. This is a joke. And the breakthrough for me was I was talking to some of my teammates and I was quite shocked. These high-powered CEOs, business owners, really accomplished people felt exactly the same as I did. I thought, oh, well, then maybe I am supposed to be here. Maybe there is a purpose for this. Yeah.
Magic can happen when people have that freedom to be vulnerable with each other.
Yeah. And that was something, the bonds that we formed in our cohort are lifelong friendships. We still keep in contact with each other.
Did you have to do some of those physical challenges like in the Kimberley and places like that?
Yes, we had that. There's a cone of silence around those experiences, but yes, it was a pretty interesting self-exploration. It gets you to do things that you didn't think you could do. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Fair enough. So I haven't mentioned earlier that this interview is based on a story by Kerry Sharp, which is in issue 160 of Outback magazine. Kerry ends the story with a quote from you. I sometimes ask myself why on earth I live in Tennant Creek with all its heat, dust and flies. You say the reason is my job, but I'm sure that there's more to it than that.
There is more to it than that. I think it's a real deep sense of fulfillment of doing something worthwhile, something that not a lot of people would be able to do because of the isolation, because of the remoteness. And I think my unique set of skills, life experiences, and character traits put me in a really good position to make a difference to the people that I work with and associate with in Tennant Creek and in the Barkly region. And through my work with Krana Plus in the wider remote health industry as well, to use it to improve healthcare for Australians and other people who need healthcare in remote areas of Australia. I think it's a pretty special thing to be a part of. And yeah, my life has been blessed with having that opportunity.
We talked about the end result of what you do being better healthcare for patients in remote areas. Why is that so important to you?
The general level of healthcare in Australia is directly proportional to how far you are away from major centres. So, and it doesn't have anything to do specifically with ethnicity. Anyone who lives further away from the city generally has poorer health. And that's despite the fact that country living in many ways is healthier than city living. However, the downsides, such as reduced food security, social, professional isolation, tends to counteract those positive influences, like much more able to have a dog and take the dog for walks and be outdoors and those sort of things, which are positive influences. But there are much greater rates of alcohol abuse and people relying on alcohol and other substances, and smoking, which sadly is higher. The further away you get from the city, the higher it is. So I think when we base healthcare on population, so that where there are the most people, we provide the most services, it seriously disadvantages anybody who's outside those population centres. And I think we need dedicated people who are willing to make the sacrifices needed to provide services out in remote areas. I think if we try and do like some other professions have done and build it into the system where new graduates have to go and work in remote to have any hope of to progress in their career, I think we end up with a resentful workforce who don't want to be there. I think it's much better to attract people who want to do good work, who want to make a difference. And if we can attract and sustain those people in our areas, in our regions, in our little country towns, I think we're all going to be a whole lot better off, especially if you're dealing with caring professions like medicine and nursing. You know, we want people who want to be there, not people that feel like they don't have any other choice.
Well, it sounds like a really positive note to end on, John. I'll just mention that again that this interview is based on a story in issue 160 of Outback magazine, written by Kerry Sharp. If you enjoyed this interview, I'm sure you'll enjoy our magazine. If you don't already, you can find out more at outbackmag.com.au. Thanks again for joining me, John, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Terry. It's been a great pleasure.